The air in Bogotá was crisp that April morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the imposing mountains that embraced the Colombian capital. At El Mirador Estate, located on the outskirts of the city, with a privileged view of the savannah, hundreds of workers put the finishing touches on what promised to be the most exclusive wedding of the year. Orchids imported from every corner of the country adorned each corner, while French crystal glittered under the enormous chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Alejandro Montero, standing in front of the mirror in his suite, adjusted his Italian silk tie with slightly trembling fingers. At 35, he was the CEO of Montero Tech, one of Latin America's most successful technological startups, with offices in Bogotá, Mexico City, and Miami. His face, usually impassive during the tensest negotiations, now reflected an unease he couldn't quite explain. "It should feel different, shouldn't it?" he murmured to himself, observing his immaculate reflection. "The happiest day of my life." His phone vibrated on the mahogany table. As he picked it up, the blood drained from his face. A message from Valeria, his fiancée. "I can't do this, Alejandro. I never really loved you. I'm sorry." 15 minutes later, standing before 300 guests, including politicians, business people, celebrities, and families from Bogotá's elite, Ricardo Salazar, his personal assistant of 8 years, approached with a devastated expression. "Sir, she's not coming." The words fell like a sentence. Whispers began to spread among the attendees, while the photographers hired to capture the perfect moment now immortalized his humiliation. Alejandro remained impassive, back straight and chin high as he left the altar. Only once inside his car did he allow his shoulders to slump. Sometimes the universe breaks our heart so we can discover that there is something much more valuable than what we thought we desired, his paternal grandmother had said years ago, words that now resonated like a prophecy as the armored Mercedes drove away down the highway, leaving behind the scene of his greatest humiliation. 3 weeks after the scandal, Alejandro's mansion in the exclusive Rosales neighborhood remained in darkness. Closed curtains prevented light from entering, creating an atmosphere as gloomy as its owner's mood. Ricardo Salazar walked the silent hallways each morning, tray in hand with breakfast that would invariably return untouched. 8 years alongside Alejandro Montero had taught him to read between the lines, anticipate needs, and solve problems before they manifested. But this was beyond his experience. "Sir, you have 15 missed calls from the board of directors," he informed, leaving the tray on the side table. "Mr. Morales insists that they must make important decisions regarding the Bogotá digital project." Alejandro, seated by the window overlooking the city, barely moved. His weeks-old beard and disheveled hair contrasted dramatically with his usual impeccable appearance. "Tell them I'm sick," he replied in a voice rough from disuse. "That excuse worked the first week, sir. Now they're talking about invoking the temporary incapacity clause." This information seemed to awaken something in Alejandro. He turned slowly. "They're considering removing me." Ricardo nodded gravely. "They're afraid, sir. The shares have fallen 15% since the incident. The press won't stop speculating about your mental state." "My mental state is perfectly fine," Alejandro snapped, standing up with sudden energy. "I just need everyone to leave me alone. With all due respect, sir, locking yourself in here is only proving right those who doubt you." Alejandro observed his assistant with a mixture of irritation and reluctant respect. Ricardo, with his perpetual white shirt and discreet tie, was probably the only person who dared speak to him with such frankness. "What do you suggest then, Ricardo? That I go out and face the pitying looks? The headlines about the abandoned millionaire?" "I suggest a change of scenery," Ricardo replied, extracting a folder from his briefcase. "The estate in Quindío that you purchased 3 years ago as an investment. It's ready to be occupied and remote enough to guarantee privacy." Alejandro took the folder skeptically. He vaguely remembered the purchase. A whim, after closing a multi-million-dollar contract with the government, a traditional coffee estate in the Coffee Axis region that his financial team had recommended as asset diversification. "Quindío, you're suggesting I go live among coffee plantations. I'm suggesting you get away from the media spotlight while you regain control. From there you can work remotely, attend crucial meetings by video conference, and avoid becoming the talk of all Bogotá." Alejandro flipped through the report pages, pausing at photographs of the property. A colonial-style house surrounded by green mountains, with coffee plantations stretching toward the horizon. "Prepare everything," he decided suddenly. "We leave tomorrow at dawn." As Ricardo left the room, Alejandro looked out the window again. Bogotá stretched before him as always, indifferent to his personal drama. Perhaps it was time to discover what lay beyond the skyscrapers and boardrooms that had defined his existence until now. The road wound through the mountains as the urban landscape gradually gave way to the intense greens of Colombia's coffee axis. Alejandro, in the back seat of the SUV, watched distractedly as clouds played hide-and-seek among the peaks of the Cordillera. Each kilometer he moved away from Bogotá seemed to slightly ease the weight on his shoulders. "We're arriving, sir," announced Ricardo from the front passenger seat. "According to the GPS, the entrance to the estate is about 5 minutes away." The turnoff to La Esperanza estate was barely signposted, a modest wooden sign half covered by vegetation. The SUV advanced along a dirt road, bordered by coffee bushes loaded with green beans that would soon mature into the characteristic red of harvest time. Turning the last curve, the main house appeared before them, and Alejandro's expression visibly tensed. "Is this what I paid $2 million for?" he exclaimed, observing the deteriorated building. The report showed completely different photographs. The estate, while retaining its colonial architectural elegance, showed years of neglect. The white paint peeled off the walls, several tiles were missing from the roof, and vegetation had partially invaded the front corridor. "It seems the photos in the report were outdated," murmured Ricardo, nervously consulting his tablet. "The local manager should be waiting for us." As if responding to his words, a middle-aged man with sun-weathered skin approached from the coffee fields, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. "Don Alejandro, welcome to La Esperanza," he greeted with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm Carlos Jimenez, the estate manager. Forgive us for not being at the entrance. We're preparing for the harvest season." Alejandro descended from the vehicle with a stern expression. "Mr. Jimenez, can you explain why the property is in this condition? The reports I received indicated impeccable facilities." The manager's smile faltered slightly. "Don Alejandro, we've kept the estate operational and the coffee fields producing first-class coffee. The house, well, we prioritized resources for production, as your advisors indicated. The house needs some repairs, yes, but it's completely habitable." "Some repairs? The roof is literally full of holes." "Only in the west wing, sir. The main rooms are in perfect condition." Ricardo intervened diplomatically. "Perhaps we should see the interior before drawing conclusions, sir." Grumbling, Alejandro followed the manager to the entrance. The interior of the house turned out to be less disastrous than its facade. The wooden floors, though worn, retained their original beauty. The high ceilings with exposed beams gave amplitude to the rooms, and natural light generously entered through large windows. "The rooms are prepared," explained Carlos, guiding them to the second floor. "And we've hired additional staff to attend to your needs during your stay." "We'll need to begin repairs immediately," declared Alejandro, examining each detail with a critical eye. "And we'll require high-speed internet. It's essential for my work." "About that," Carlos exchanged an uncomfortable look with Ricardo. "The connection here is limited, but the town is working on improving the infrastructure." "Limited? What exactly does limited mean?" "It works mainly in the mornings, sir. Storms and the mountain location affect the signal." Alejandro closed his eyes, containing his frustration. When he opened them again, his voice sounded dangerously controlled. "Ricardo, immediately contact our telecommunications division. I want a team here tomorrow to install whatever is necessary." "Yes, sir." "We'll also need to hire staff for the repairs." "The town has good carpenters and masons," offered Carlos. "And for the garden repairs, you could consult with Sofia Mendoza. She has the best nursery in the region and knows local plants like no one else." "Perfect. Hire whoever is necessary," Alejandro responded distractedly as he gazed out the window at coffee fields stretching toward the mountains. "I want this house operational within a week." Carlos and Ricardo exchanged a knowing look. The businessman clearly didn't understand the slower rhythms of rural Colombian life. 2 days later, Alejandro discovered that the improved internet was still insufficient for his video conferences, that local carpenters worked at their own imperturbable pace, and that tropical rain could absolutely paralyze everything. "It's unacceptable," he protested while pacing back and forth in the main living room. "I have a crucial meeting with investors tomorrow and can't even guarantee a stable connection." Ricardo, who had developed infinite patience during his years with the demanding businessman, tried to calm the waters. "The technical team assures that they'll have a solution implemented in 3 days, sir. Meanwhile, we could focus on other aspects of the restoration." A knock on the main door interrupted the conversation. Carlos entered accompanied by a young woman carrying a folder who seemed slightly intimidated. "Don Alejandro, this is Sofia Mendoza from the nursery I mentioned. She's brought some proposals for restoring the gardens." Alejandro turned his attention to the newcomer. Sofia Mendoza didn't match the image of a gardener he had anticipated. She wore simple jeans and a white cotton blouse, with her black hair gathered in a practical braid. Her light brown skin revealed hours under the sun, but her brown eyes projected an intelligence and determination that immediately caught his interest. "Mr. Montero," she greeted with a serene voice that contrasted with her evident nervousness. "I've prepared some ideas to recover the original beauty of La Esperanza's gardens, respecting their history and the local ecosystem." "Local ecosystem? I just need the garden to look presentable. I'm not planning a conservation project," replied Alejandro, more brusquely than intended. Instead of being intimidated, Sofia slightly raised her chin. "With all due respect, Mr. Montero, this estate is over 150 years old. Its gardens were designed to complement the coffee landscape, not compete with it. I can make it look presentable by urban standards, or I can restore its true historical and sustainable beauty. The choice is yours." A tense silence followed her words. Ricardo and Carlos held their breath, anticipating one of Alejandro's famous temper outbursts. To everyone's surprise, including Alejandro himself, a faint smile appeared on his lips. "Show me your proposals, Miss Mendoza. Let's see if your knowledge matches your determination." Evening was falling over the coffee fields when the clouds, which had been threateningly accumulating for hours, finally released their fury. Tropical rain violently beat against the roofs of La Esperanza, while wind shook the windows with unpredictable gusts. Alejandro watched the storm from the covered porch, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. 4 days in Quindío had subtly altered his routines. He woke up to the rooster's crow, drank coffee grown on his own estate, and spent less time in front of screens. "It's going to be a long night," commented Carlos, joining him in contemplation. "These April storms typically last until dawn." "Will it affect the restoration work?" asked Alejandro, thinking about the schedule he had established. "We'll probably delay the installation of new tiles by a day," replied the manager pragmatically. "Nature dictates the timing here, Don Alejandro." Before he could respond, the sound of a struggling engine came from the entrance path. Through the curtain of water, they distinguished the lights of an old jeep approaching with difficulty. "Who would venture out in this weather?" murmured Carlos, squinting. The vehicle stopped in front of the house and, to Alejandro's surprise, Sofia Mendoza emerged, covered by a yellow raincoat that contrasted vividly with the greyish evening. She carried several bags and what appeared to be potted plants. "Sofia!" exclaimed Carlos, running to help her. "What are you doing here in this storm?" The young woman quickly advanced toward the porch, shaking off the water once under cover. "The orchids for the greenhouse arrived today," she explained, indicating her cargo. "I couldn't leave them at the nursery in this weather. They're too delicate." Alejandro approached, taking some of the bags. "You could have waited until the storm subsided, Miss Mendoza. There was no need to risk yourself." Sofia gave him a direct look. "Plants don't wait, Mr. Montero. Some opportunities, like the right time for transplanting, don't repeat themselves." Carlos intervened, concerned. "The stream must be swollen with this rain. You won't be able to return to town tonight." Sofia's expression revealed she hadn't considered this detail. "Oh, I didn't think about that." "You'll have to stay here," decided Alejandro, surprising himself with the quickness of his offer. "There are plenty of rooms, and it would be irresponsible to let you drive in these conditions." "I don't want to impose. I insist. Ricardo can show you to a room while Carlos and I take these plants to the greenhouse." Dinner that night turned out to be surprisingly pleasant. The estate's cook, Doña Mercedes, had prepared a traditional bandeja paisa that Alejandro had barely tasted in his previous rare visits to the region. "This is delicious," he commented, savoring the dish with genuine appreciation. very different from what I usually eat in Bogotá. Doña Mercedes has magic hands, Sofia smiled. Her beans are famous throughout town. Conversation flowed naturally as the storm continued to rage outside. Alejandro discovered that Sofia wasn't just a gardener, but a biology graduate from the National University who had decided to return to her hometown after her father's illness. "You could be working for any multinational with your background," he commented, genuinely intrigued. "Why choose to stay here?" Sofia considered the question while pouring more lulo juice into her glass. "City life offers opportunities, certainly, but here I find purpose. My nursery employs single mothers from town. We preserve native species, and I work closely with coffee farmers on more sustainable practices. Admirable, but economically impractical, I imagine." "Not all value is measured in pesos, Mr. Montero," she responded with a serene smile. "The freedom to decide over my time, to see the direct impact of my work, to be part of a community that has incalculable value." Her words resonated uncomfortably with Alejandro. His entire life had been oriented toward measurable success, business expansion, acquisitions, market valuation. The idea that success could be defined by such intangible parameters as Sofia described was destabilizing. "Ricardo mentioned that your company develops technological solutions for smart cities," intervened Sofia, skillfully changing the subject. "How did you become interested in that field?" For the next hour, to his own surprise, Alejandro found himself sharing details about his company's beginnings, the difficulties in obtaining initial funding, and his vision of transforming Latin America's urban challenges through technology. "The real power of technology lies in democratizing opportunities," he explained, with enthusiasm he hadn't felt in a long time. "Our telemedicine solutions are reaching regions where there had never been a specialist." "That's truly impressive," responded Sofia with sincere admiration. "Technology as a tool for inclusion, not exclusion." The conversation continued well into the night, only occasionally interrupted by the roar of thunder. By the time they decided to retire, Alejandro experienced a strange sensation of lightness he couldn't remember feeling in a long time. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Montero," Sofia said goodbye in the hallway leading to the bedrooms, "and for saving my orchids." "Thank you for the conversation, Miss Mendoza," he replied, "and for reminding me that life exists beyond boardrooms." That night, as the storm finally subsided over the coffee fields, Alejandro lay awake, contemplating the wooden ceiling of his bedroom. Sofia's words about value and purpose reverberated in his mind, raising uncomfortable questions about the decisions that had shaped his own life. For the first time since the disaster of his failed wedding, his thoughts weren't dominated by humiliation or resentment. Instead, he felt a nascent curiosity about that world so different from his own, that extended beyond the windows of La Esperanza. The following weeks brought subtle but significant changes to La Esperanza. Under Sofia's supervision, the gardens began to recover their original splendor. Bougainvillea climbed the porch columns, vibrant heliconias bordered the paths, and a small herb garden perfumed the air near the kitchen. Alejandro, though initially skeptical about many of Sofia's suggestions, "Do we really need to attract hummingbirds?" gradually began to appreciate the transformation. Each morning, before remotely connecting with his team in Bogotá, he dedicated time to walking the property, observing the progress and familiarizing himself with an environment that, surprisingly, he was beginning to feel as his own. "The orchids in the greenhouse are blooming," announced Sofia one afternoon, finding him at his improvised office on the terrace. "I thought you might like to see it." Alejandro automatically checked his watch. "I have a video conference in 20 minutes. "It will take only 10, I promise," she insisted with a smile he had learned to recognize as a sign of determination. "Some blooms last barely a day." Sighing with feigned resignation, Alejandro followed her to the small restored greenhouse located at the garden's edge. Upon entering, he was momentarily speechless. Dozens of orchids of different species had bloomed simultaneously, creating an explosion of colors and shapes that completely transformed the space. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, approaching to examine a particularly striking one of intense purple. "How did you manage to synchronize their blooming?" Sofia let out a little laugh. "I don't have that much power, Mr. Montero. It's nature responding to the right conditions. We only create the environment and respect the cycles." "Like in business," he reflected, surprising himself with the analogy. Creating the right ecosystem and allowing innovations to flourish naturally. Exactly, she nodded, visibly pleased with his understanding. Though here the results are more immediately gratifying, don't you think? Alejandro extended his hand to gently touch one of the petals. And more beautiful, without doubt. Their gazes met briefly in that intimate space, surrounded by life and color. Something indefinable passed between them, a momentary connection that both felt but neither named. The sound of Alejandro's phone broke the moment. "My video conference," he explained, stepping back slightly. "I must go." "Of course," she responded, turning her attention back to the plants. "The orchids will be here tomorrow." As he hurriedly returned to the house, Alejandro found himself thinking that perhaps he too would be there tomorrow to see them, despite his initial plans to return to Bogotá much earlier. The region's annual coffee festival was approaching, and the entire town vibrated with preparations. To Ricardo's surprise, Alejandro not only accepted the invitation to participate, but offered to sponsor part of the event. "The estate has been part of this community for generations, even if I'm a newcomer," he explained to his perplexed assistant. "It's the least we can do." On the day of the festival, Alejandro found himself immersed in a world completely foreign to his usual experience. Traditional dances, coffee-tasting competitions, local crafts, and music resonating through the cobblestone streets of the town. "Don Alejandro," greeted Carlos, approaching with a group of men, "I want to introduce you to the farmers from the local association. They're very interested in your direct trade initiative." For the next hour, Alejandro found himself engaged in conversations about cultivation methods, climate change, and export channels. To his surprise, he found these exchanges refreshing. Concrete problems, genuine people, without the layers of corporate politics he was accustomed to. "Your knowledge of the international market is invaluable to us," commented one of the older farmers. "Most buyers have never seen how a coffee bean grows. And I had never seen the complete process until I came here," admitted Alejandro. "There's much we can learn from each other." As he toured the main square, Alejandro spotted Sofia at a stall adorned with plants and flowers. He approached, observing as she enthusiastically explained to a group of children the properties of different medicinal herbs. "It seems you have admirers of all ages," he commented when the children moved away. Sofia turned, surprised and visibly pleased to see him. "Mr. Montero, I didn't expect to find you enjoying our local traditions." "Alejandro, please," he corrected with a smile. "After seeing me struggle with garden ants for weeks, I think we've moved beyond formalities." She nodded, with an amused sparkle in her eyes. "Alejandro, then. Are you enjoying the festival?" "Much more than I anticipated," he confessed. "Your town knows how to celebrate life with an authenticity I had forgotten existed." "Come," she said impulsively, taking his arm. "I want to show you something." Sofia guided him through less crowded alleys until they reached a small hill from where they could see the entire town, with mountains as a backdrop and coffee fields extending in all directions. "My favorite place," she explained, sitting on a flat rock. "I come here when I need to remember why I chose to stay." Alejandro sat beside her, absorbing the peace of the moment and the beauty of the landscape. "I'm beginning to understand your choice," he murmured. "Really?" she asked, looking at him with genuine curiosity. "You don't seem the type of person who would exchange skyscrapers for coffee fields." "And I wasn't," he admitted. "But these months here, they've changed something in me. It's as if I had been breathing recycled air all my life and suddenly discovered what pure oxygen is." Sofia smiled, with a mixture of understanding and something deeper that Alejandro didn't dare to name. "Nature has that effect. It reconnects us with the essential." "It's not just nature," he replied, holding her gaze. "It's the community, the people, you." The silence that followed was charged with unexpressed possibilities. From the town came the distant chords of music, while the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. "We should head back," suggested Sofia finally, though without moving. "The traditional dance will begin soon." "Do you dance?" asked Alejandro, extending his hand toward her. "Do you?" She returned the question with a challenging smile. "Let's find out." That night, under the stars and colored lights adorning the square, Alejandro Montero, the relentless CEO who terrorized boardrooms, learned to dance cumbia and bambuco with the locals. His initially awkward movements improved under Sofia's patient guidance until they found a shared rhythm that seemed to extend beyond the dance itself. June brought with it a humid heat that permeated La Esperanza. Restoration work was practically complete. The house had recovered its colonial elegance. The gardens flourished exuberantly, and the internet system finally worked with the efficiency Alejandro required for his work. To Ricardo's surprise and Alejandro's own, what had begun as a temporary retreat was becoming an indefinite stay. Video conferences with Bogotá continued regularly, but now Alejandro delegated more, trusted his team more, and allowed himself to completely disconnect during weekends. Mr. Morales from the board of directors asked when you'll permanently return to Bogotá, commented Ricardo one morning as they reviewed documents in the study. The shares have stabilized and investors are satisfied with the latest reports. Alejandro contemplated the question while watching Sofia through the window, working in the central garden alongside two women from town she had hired as helpers. "I'm in no hurry, Ricardo," he finally replied. "The company is functioning well with this hybrid system, and here I can think more clearly." Ricardo nodded, hiding a smile. In 8 years working for Alejandro Montero, he had never seen him so balanced, so genuinely present in his life, instead of merely executing a perfectly planned existence. "By the way," added Ricardo, extracting an envelope from his portfolio, "this invitation arrived for you. The anniversary of Tech Invest Colombia in Bogotá next week." Alejandro examined the elegant invitation. Tech Invest was one of the country's most important business gatherings, where strategic alliances were forged, and the most promising innovations in the sector were presented. "You should attend," commented Ricardo, "especially considering that Montero Tech will receive recognition for the rural telemedicine platform." "You're right," conceded Alejandro. "Prepare everything for a 3-day trip to Bogotá. We'll return immediately after the event." As Ricardo withdrew to organize the details, Alejandro headed toward the garden. Sofia looked up from her work upon sensing his presence, greeting him with a smile he had come to anticipate each morning. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. "For you, I always have time," she replied, removing her gardening gloves. "Is something wrong?" "I must travel to Bogotá next week. An important event in the technology sector." "Oh," she responded, and Alejandro thought he detected a flash of disappointment quickly masked. "How long will you be away?" "Just 3 days. Ricardo is organizing everything." Sofia nodded, turning her attention back to a plant she was transplanting. "I'm sure it will do you good to reconnect with your world." "My world," he repeated, frowning slightly. "What about this one? Isn't it also my world now?" She looked at him directly with an intensity that disarmed him. "I don't know, Alejandro. You tell me." Before he could respond, the sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted the moment. A luxury car that dramatically contrasted with the utilitarian vehicles usual in the area stopped in front of the house. To Alejandro's astonishment, Valeria Sandoval, his ex-fiancée, emerged from the vehicle with the studied grace that had always characterized her. Impeccably dressed in a designer suit and brand-name sunglasses, she seemed absolutely out of place in the rural setting. "Alejandro, darling," she exclaimed, approaching with open arms. "I've finally found you. You've been completely incommunicado." Alejandro remained motionless, as if frozen by the improbability of the scene. Beside him, he felt Sofia visibly tense. "Valeria," he finally responded, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is a surprise." "A necessary one," she replied, kissing both his cheeks as if nothing had happened between them. "We have much to discuss. In private," she added, casting an evaluative glance towards Sofia. "Sofia Mendoza, our landscaping specialist," Alejandro introduced mechanically. "Sofia Valeria Sandoval." "A pleasure," murmured Sofia, though her expression suggested otherwise. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." Alejandro watched her walk away, feeling an inexplicable sense of loss. When he turned his attention back to Valeria, his expression had hardened. "What are you doing here, Valeria? You were quite clear the last time we had contact." "I made a terrible mistake, Alejandro," she replied with tears that seemed to appear at will. "I've spent these months reflecting on what we had, on what I lost. I needed to see you, explain—" "There's nothing to explain," he interrupted her. I'm grateful you abandoned me before we committed a mistake we would both have regretted. Don't be cruel, please, she pleaded, touching his arm. At least listen to me. I owe you that. We owe ourselves that. Alejandro sighed deeply. Let's go inside. Ricardo will prepare a room for you to refresh yourself. We'll talk during dinner. As Valeria was led inside by Ricardo, whose professionally neutral expression barely concealed his disapproval, Alejandro remained in the garden, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. His gaze instinctively turned toward the nursery where Sophia had disappeared, but he restrained himself from following her. The reappearance of Valeria, like a ghost from the past, had created a fissure in the new reality he had been building at La Esperanza. A reality in which, he realized now, Sofia Mendoza occupied a central place. Dinner that night at La Esperanza took place in an atmosphere charged with unexpressed tensions. Alejandro, seated at the head of the table, barely touched his food while watching Valeria, animatedly relating anecdotes from Bogotá's high society, as if the last few months had never occurred. Galleria Design's new project is absolutely dazzling, she was commenting, gesturing elegantly with a bejeweled hand. They have a revolutionary concept for post-pandemic workspaces that will revolutionize the corporate real estate sector. Ricardo, whose presence Alejandro had expressly requested for dinner, maintained an impassive expression while serving more wine. Carlos, the manager, had diplomatically excused himself, leaving the three of them alone in the dining room. "Sounds interesting," responded Alejandro mechanically. "What really brings you to Quindío, Valeria? I doubt you drove 5 hours from Bogotá to talk to me about architectural projects." Valeria carefully set down her wineglass, adopting a studied expression of seriousness. "Straight to the point, as always. It's one of the things I always admired about you, Alejandro." "I'm waiting for that point." She sighed theatrically. "Very well. I've come because Fernando Riveros is organizing a hostile takeover of Montero Tech." The statement fell like a bomb in the dining room's quiet. Ricardo, in the middle of serving a salad, momentarily paused. "Fernando Riveros, the CEO of Digilatum?" Alejandro leaned forward, suddenly alert. Digilatum was his main competitor in the Latin American market for technological solutions. "The very same," confirmed Valeria. "He's been quietly gathering support among your minority shareholders. My father attended a private dinner where Fernando presented his plan to dismantle Montero Tech and absorb its most profitable divisions." "And how did you obtain this information?" asked Alejandro, narrowing his eyes with suspicion. "My family has interests in various sectors, as you well know. News travels fast in certain circles," Ricardo intervened discreetly. "Sir, I've been monitoring unusual share movements over the past few weeks. There was a 7% increase in minority transactions that we attributed to normal fluctuations, but it could align with what Miss Sandoval mentions." Alejandro nodded, processing the information. "Why would you warn me about this, Valeria? The last time we saw each other, you made it quite clear that your interest in me had ended." Valeria extended her hand across the table, almost touching Alejandro's. "I made a terrible mistake, driven by unfounded fears and bad advice. These months apart have made me see what truly matters, what I really want." "And what exactly is it that you want?" he asked, subtly withdrawing his hand. "You, Alejandro, us, the life we had planned." Her eyes shone with what seemed like genuine tears. "I know you may not believe me now, but I came to warn you about Riveros as proof of my sincerity. I want a second chance." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening and closing. Moments later, Sophia briefly appeared in the dining room doorway with a small package in her hands. "Excuse the interruption," she said, visibly uncomfortable upon noticing the intimate scene. "I just came to drop off the seeds I promised for the garden. I'll leave them in the kitchen." "Sophia," called Alejandro, rising quickly. "You don't have to leave. Join us?" "I wouldn't want to interrupt," she responded, casting a meaningful glance toward Valeria, who observed her with calculated interest. "It's a private conversation." "I insist," said Alejandro, approaching her. "Ricardo, could you set another place at the table?" Valeria watched the exchange with an analytical expression. "I didn't know your employees regularly dined with you, Alejandro. How democratic of you." "Sophia is not my employee," Alejandro corrected firmly. "She is a respected friend and advisor. Dinner continued in an even tenser atmosphere, with Valeria directing seemingly innocent questions to Sofia about her training, her work, and her relationship with the estate. To Alejandro's surprise and admiration, Sofia responded with a composure and dignity that contrasted markedly with Valeria's subtle attempts to belittle her. "Have you never considered developing your career in Bogotá?" inquired Valeria. "With your background in biology, you would surely find more substantial opportunities than arranging rural gardens." Sofia smiled serenely. "I've discovered that a job's substance rarely relates to its geographic location or social recognition. I find purpose in what I do here, and for me that is success." Alejandro couldn't help a smile of approval at the response. Later that night, as Valeria retired to the room prepared for her, Alejandro found Sofia on the back porch, contemplating the starry sky above the coffee fields. "I apologize for tonight," he said, joining her at the railing. "Valeria can be intense." "You don't have to apologize," Sofia responded without looking at him. "It's evident that you have history and unfinished business." "A finished history," he clarified. "Whatever we had ended the day, she didn't show up at our wedding." Sofia finally turned to look at him. "Are you sure? Because from my perspective, it seems she's quite interested in rewriting that ending. What Valeria wants is no longer relevant to me." "And what is relevant to you, Alejandro?" she asked with a vulnerability she rarely showed. "What do you really want?" The question hung between them, loaded with implicit meanings. Alejandro took a step toward her, shortening the distance. "These months at La Esperanza have changed me, Sofia. They've shown me a life I never considered possible for someone like me. A life with space to breathe, to appreciate each sunrise, to truly connect with people." He paused, gathering courage. "To connect with you." Sofia's eyes shone under the moonlight. "And Bogotá? Your company? The life you built there?" "I don't have all the answers yet," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to go back to the person I was before meeting you. The man obsessed solely with material success, unable to see the value of what you've shown me. I'm afraid, Alejandro," she confessed in a whisper. "Afraid of allowing myself to feel something for someone whose world is so different from mine. Afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize that this rural interlude was just that, a temporary parenthesis in your real life." Alejandro gently took her hand. "I can't promise you that everything will be perfect, Sofia. I can only promise you that what I feel for you is real, more real than anything I've felt before." When their lips finally met under the starry canopy, both felt that something fundamental shifted and rearranged in their personal universes, a kiss that tasted of possibilities, of futures to be written, of converging paths that neither had anticipated. Neither of them noticed Valeria's figure silently watching them from a second-floor window, her expression indecipherable in the night's darkness. The next morning brought a strangely calm atmosphere to La Esperanza. Alejandro woke early, with a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The conversation with Sofia, culminating in that kiss under the stars, had crystallized feelings that had been silently forming for weeks. As he prepared for the day, a determination settled within him. It was time to confront both the threats to his company and Valeria's uncomfortable presence. He wouldn't allow the past to compromise the future he was beginning to envision. Descending to the dining room, he found Ricardo already working on his laptop with a concentrated expression. "Good morning, sir," he greeted, briefly looking up. "I've been verifying Miss Sandoval's information. It seems she was right. There are movements consistent with preparation for a hostile takeover. Recommendations?" asked Alejandro, serving himself coffee. "We need to return to Bogotá sooner than planned. The board of directors must be informed, and we'll have to prepare a defensive strategy." Alejandro nodded. "Prepare everything to leave early tomorrow, and Ricardo—" He paused, carefully considering his words. "I want you to discreetly investigate Valeria. Her sudden appearance with this information, it's too convenient." "I'm already doing that, sir," Ricardo replied with a slight smile. "Some coincidences merit scrutiny." The dining room door opened, and Valeria entered radiantly, dressed in a simple but evidently expensive outfit that seemed designed to feign rural informality without sacrificing elegance. "Good morning," she greeted cheerfully. "How wonderful to wake up to birdsong instead of traffic noise, isn't it?" "A discovery I made months ago," replied Alejandro dryly. Ricardo and I were discussing the situation with Digilatam. I'll return to Bogotá tomorrow to personally address the matter. Valeria's face lit up. Perfect, we can travel together. My driver can pick us up. That won't be necessary. I have my own transportation. Valeria seemed momentarily thwarted, but quickly recovered her smile. Of course. May I ask how long you plan to stay in Bogotá? Or is this the end of your rural retreat? Before Alejandro could respond, Sofia appeared at the dining room entrance. She wore her usual work attire, jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved shirt to protect herself from the sun. Her expression was reserved, but her eyes immediately sought Alejandro's. "Good morning," she greeted formally. "I came to check the greenhouse's irrigation system before the heat increases." "Sofia," Alejandro stood, moved by an instinctive impulse to approach her. "Can we talk for a moment?" Privately. Valeria observed the exchange with growing interest. Her eyes narrowed while evaluating the dynamic between them. "Of course," responded Sofia. "I'll be in the greenhouse when you're ready." After she left, Valeria turned to Alejandro with an inquisitive expression. "You seem quite close to your advisor, Alejandro." "I don't think my personal relationships are your business, Valeria," he firmly replied. "You lost that right a long time ago." In the greenhouse, Sofia meticulously adjusted the automated irrigation system, though her mind was evidently elsewhere. Sensing Alejandro's presence, she straightened, facing him with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. "I must return to Bogotá tomorrow," he began without preamble. "The situation with my company is more urgent than I thought." Sofia nodded, storing the tools she'd been using. "I understand. It's your responsibility. I want you to know that what happened last night, what I told you—" He paused, searching for the exact words. "It was all true, Sofia. My feelings for you are real. So are mine," she admitted, holding his gaze. "But we come from very different worlds, Alejandro. Perhaps at La Esperanza in this environment, we can find middle ground. But when you return to your life in Bogotá—" "Come with me," he interrupted, surprising her. "To Bogotá, just for a few days. I want to show you that I can be the same man there as I am here." The proposition took her by surprise. "Go to Bogotá? I can't simply abandon my responsibilities here." "Just for a few days," he insisted. "Enough time to resolve this crisis. Afterward, we can decide together what comes next." Sofia seemed to be debating internally. "And Valeria? It's obvious she's come to get you back." "Valeria is my past. A past that ironically helped me find my way to you." Alejandro took her hands in his. "Trust me, Sofia. Give me the chance to show you that what we have can exist in both worlds." After a long moment, she slowly nodded. "All right, I'll go with you. But I need a day to organize everything here. The plants, the nursery—" Alejandro's smile lit up his face. "Ricardo will take care of booking everything. How does the day after tomorrow sound?" Before she could respond, the sound of a notification interrupted the moment. Alejandro extracted his phone from his pocket, frowning as he read the message. "Is something wrong?" asked Sofia, noticing his expression. "It could be," he murmured. "Ricardo has found something about Valeria. Apparently her family has been experiencing serious financial difficulties over the last year. And there's more. Her father recently met with Fernando Riveros. The same Fernando Riveros who supposedly plans to acquire your company." Alejandro nodded grimly. "The very same. This is not a coincidence." "Do you think Valeria is working for him?" "I don't know for certain, but I need to find out before we depart for Bogotá." The opportunity to confront Valeria came that same afternoon. Alejandro found her in the estate's library, apparently absorbed in a book, though her frequent glances at her phone suggested her literary interest was superficial. "Valeria," he began, closing the door behind him, "something doesn't add up in your story." She looked up with a perfectly composed expression. "What do you mean, darling?" "Your sudden concern for my corporate welfare, the convenient information about Riveros, the financial crisis your family has been carefully concealing." Her face momentarily lost its composure before recovering. "I see you've been investigating me, always so meticulous. Why are you really here, Valeria? What agreement do you have with Riveros?" Valeria slowly closed the book, placing it on the table. When she looked at him again, her expression had completely changed. The mask of vulnerability replaced by cold calculation. "You're more perceptive than I thought. Or perhaps your new rural toy has given you a fresh perspective, she commented disdainfully. Very well, Alejandro. I'll be direct. Fernando Riveros offered to save my family from bankruptcy in exchange for inside information about Montero Tech. Was abandoning me at the altar part of that plan? A bitter laugh escaped her lips. No, that was genuine. I couldn't bear the thought of being tied for life to someone so obsessed with success that he forgot to live. But when my father lost practically everything in bad investments, Riveros saw an opportunity. And what exactly was the plan? To win me back to spy from within? Initially, yes, she admitted with no apparent remorse. But seeing how you look at your gardener, I realized that approach would be futile. So we moved to Plan B, luring you back to Bogotá, where Riveros has a very particular trap prepared. Alejandro observed her with a mixture of revulsion and pity. What kind of trap? The extraordinary board meeting that Riveros has secretly convened for Thursday. With fabricated evidence about embezzlement you supposedly committed before your rural exile. Quite convincing, I must say. Why are you telling me this now? Valeria stood, approaching him with deliberate steps. Because I've decided there's something more valuable I can get from you, something not even Riveros can offer me. And what would that be? A dignified exit, $50 million transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands, and I disappear from your life forever. Riveros will never know I warned you, and you can prepare your defense before the ambush. Alejandro stared at her fixedly, finally recognizing the true nature of the woman he had almost made his wife. Do you really think I would agree to such extortion? Don't call it extortion, Alejandro. Call it compensation for emotional damages. She smiled without humor. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, I'll call Riveros. With these words, Valeria left the library, leaving Alejandro facing a crisis that threatened not only his corporate future, but also the new life he was just beginning to build. Night fell over La Esperanza with unusual intensity. Black clouds accumulated on the horizon, presaging one of those tropical storms that occasionally lashed the coffee region. The air, dense and charged with electricity, seemed to reflect the tension that permeated the estate. In the study, Alejandro, Ricardo and Sofia maintained a hushed conversation, evaluating the situation from every possible angle. 50 million is an exorbitant sum, Ricardo was commenting, reviewing financial documents on his laptop. But technically we could gather it by liquidating some non-essential assets. I will not yield to blackmail, Alejandro categorically responded. If I do, I would be indirectly admitting a guilt that doesn't exist. What do we know exactly about these supposed embezzlement proofs? Asked Sofia, who had insisted on participating in the discussion after Alejandro revealed Valeria's true nature to her. According to our contacts on the board, explained Ricardo, they are documents that apparently demonstrate that Alejandro diverted funds from the government project Bogotá Digital to personal accounts, approximately 6 months before the wedding incident. Which is completely false, intervened Alejandro. That project was audited 3 times by independent entities. Such evidence cannot possibly exist. Unless they were very carefully fabricated, observed Sofia. Do you have any idea how they might have created this false evidence? Ricardo and Alejandro exchanged a meaningful look. Jorge Mendez, they said almost simultaneously. Who is Jorge Mendez? Inquired Sofia. My former financial director, explained Alejandro. I fired him 8 months ago when we discovered irregularities in his management. We could never prove direct fraud, but his negligence cost the company millions. And now he works for Digilatum, added Ricardo. For Riveros. A sudden lightning bolt illuminated the room, followed almost immediately by a thunderclap. The storm had arrived. We need proof of the conspiracy between Valeria and Riveros, declared Alejandro. Something we can present to the board of directors before Thursday's meeting. Her phone, suggested Sofia. It must contain compromising communications. Impossible to access, responded Ricardo. And any evidence obtained illegally would be inadmissible. What if she herself confessed? Proposed Sofia, with a spark of inspiration in her eyes. If we could record her admitting the blackmail and her connection to Riveros? Colombia is a one-party consent state for recordings, murmured Alejandro, considering the idea. Legally, we could use it as evidence. A new lightning bolt, closer and more powerful, was immediately followed by a blackout that plunged the estate into darkness. Only the dim light from device screens vaguely illuminated the study. "The storm has knocked down the power line," commented Ricardo, rising to search for flashlights. "The emergency generator should activate at any moment." But seconds passed, and the darkness persisted. The automatic system had failed. "I'll activate it manually," offered Ricardo. "It's in the back shed." "I'll accompany you," said Sofia. "I know the terrain better in the dark." When left alone in the study, Alejandro approached the window, observing how the storm unleashed its fury over the coffee fields. Occasional lightning bolts revealed a landscape battered by wind, with palms dangerously bending and rain falling in almost horizontal curtains. The sound of the door opening made him turn. In the light of another lightning flash, he distinguished Valeria's silhouette. "How atmospheric," she commented, advancing toward him. "The perfect metaphor for the storm looming over your empire, don't you think? What do you want, Valeria?" "To check if you've made a decision about my offer." Her voice sounded confident, almost triumphant. "Time is running out, Alejandro." A plan began to form in Alejandro's mind. He discreetly activated the recorder on his phone, hidden in his shirt pocket. "I'm considering it," he responded, carefully modulating his tone. "But I need to fully understand what I get in exchange for those 50 million. What information exactly does Riveros possess?" Valeria let out a soft laugh. "Oh, Alejandro, always negotiating until the end. Very well, I'll give you a preview. Riveros has documents that apparently demonstrate you diverted almost 30 million from the Bogota digital project. Bank statements, transfers, even emails from you authorizing the movements." "That's impossible. I never sent such emails." "Of course not," she conceded, moving closer. "But Jorge Mendez turned out to be extraordinarily talented in computer forensics. The forgeries are practically indistinguishable from the originals. And your role in all this? Are you simply Riveros's messenger?" "Initially, yes. My family desperately needed the money he offered. But then it occurred to me, why settle for the crumbs Riveros was willing to give me when I could obtain a much larger prize directly from the source?" "From me," concluded Alejandro. "Exactly. Fair compensation considering our past and the future we almost shared. And if I refuse to pay?" Valeria's eyes dangerously gleamed in the light of another lightning bolt. "Then Riveros will proceed with his plan. The board will remove you. You may possibly face criminal charges, and your precious company will be dismantled and sold in parts." "All for money, Valeria. Have you really fallen so low?" "Don't judge me, Alejandro," she responded with sudden harshness. "We all do what's necessary to survive. My family is on the brink of financial collapse. This deal would save us." "And what about Riveros? Don't you fear his reaction when he discovers your betrayal?" "Riveros will never know I warned you. He'll simply think you were smarter than he anticipated." A sudden knock on the main door, barely audible over the storm's roar, interrupted the conversation. Moments later, Ricardo appeared at the study entrance, flashlight in hand. "Sir, we have a problem. The access road is blocked by a landslide and a vehicle has just arrived." "A vehicle in this weather?" Alejandro exchanged an alarmed look with Valeria. "It's a black SUV with tinted windows," continued Ricardo. 4 men descended and are requesting to enter. One of them mentioned being sent by Mr. Riveros. The color drained from Valeria's face. "It can't be," she murmured. "He was supposed to wait for my signal." "It seems your partner decided to accelerate the plans," observed Alejandro with bitter irony. "Any idea what they're looking for?" Valeria now seemed genuinely scared. "Jorge Mendez's phone. It contains the original files he used to fabricate the evidence. Riveros told me to retrieve it while keeping you distracted here." "Where is this phone?" "In Mendez's house in Bogota." "They would never find it here." Another lightning bolt illuminated the room, revealing Sofia in the doorway, soaked by the rain. "Carlos just communicated by radio," she announced, addressing Alejandro. "He says these men don't appear to be corporate representatives. They look like private mercenaries." The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Alejandro made a quick decision. "Ricardo, immediately contact our private security in Armenia. Have them come as soon as possible, even if they have to walk through the landslide. Sofia, take Valeria to the basement passageway. It was an escape route during La Violencia. It leads to an abandoned cabin a kilometer from here." "What will you do?" asked Sophia, with evident concern in her voice. Buy time, he responded, heading toward the door. And find out exactly what these men are looking for. As Sophia practically dragged a terrified Valeria toward the basement, Alejandro and Ricardo prepared to face the unexpected visitors. The storm intensified outside, turning the night into a perfect stage for the dangerous power game unfolding inside La Esperanza. Rain continued to fall relentlessly when Alejandro, accompanied by Ricardo and Carlos, received the 4 men in La Esperanza's main hall. By the flickering light of emergency lamps, the visitors' faces cast threatening shadows. Mr. Montero greeted the one who seemed to lead the group, a middle-aged man with a scar across his right cheek. We apologize for the intrusion, especially in this weather. I'm Gutierrez, head of security for Mr. Fernando Riveros. An unexpected visit, Mr. Gutierrez, replied Alejandro with calculated calm, especially considering that the access road is blocked by a landslide. We arrived just before it occurred, explained Gutierrez. Mr. Riveros sent us to discuss a matter of utmost urgency with you and with Miss Sandoval. Is she present? Miss Sandoval retired early to rest, intervened Ricardo. The storm indisposed her. Gutierrez exchanged a look with his companions. We insist on speaking with both. It's a matter that directly concerns Montero Tech's security. What kind of matter would require Fernando Riveros to send his security personnel in the middle of a tropical storm, instead of simply calling me? Inquired Alejandro, maintaining a cordial tone that contrasted with the tense atmosphere. Sensitive information, Gutierrez evasively responded. Not appropriate for a telephone conversation. Alejandro quickly evaluated his options. He needed to keep them occupied until the security team arrived from Armenia, while Sophia and Valeria reached the safe cabin. I understand, he finally nodded. Unfortunately, you'll have to make do with my presence for now. You can present your matter, and I'll ensure it's transmitted to Miss Sandoval when possible. Gutierrez seemed to consider the proposal, but one of his companions, a burly man with an impatient expression, intervened. We don't have time for this. We know she's here, and we know what she's been doing. Excuse the confusion, responded Alejandro, holding the man's gaze. But you are on private property, in the middle of a weather emergency. My manager will offer you accommodation for the night, and we can continue this conversation in the morning when Miss Sandoval is available. The tension in the room was palpable. Gutierrez visibly evaluated his options, while his companions seemed increasingly agitated. Finally, the leader nodded. We accept your hospitality, Mr. Montero, but we insist on speaking with both of you first thing in the morning. The matter cannot wait any longer. Carlos, catching Alejandro's signal, stepped forward. I'll show you the available rooms in the East Wing. Please follow me. As the 4 men followed the manager, Ricardo approached Alejandro. They're not simple security guards, he murmured. The youngest one carries a weapon under his jacket. I noticed, responded Alejandro in a low voice. Any news from our team? They're trying to arrive, but the landslide is massive. They estimate at least 3 hours to clear a minimal route. Too much time, Sophia. She sent a text message before losing coverage. They've reached the safe cabin, but Valeria is extremely nervous. Alejandro nodded, processing the information. These men didn't come to negotiate. They came to recover something, or someone. Do you think Riveros discovered Valeria's double game? It's the most probable explanation. The question is, what do we do now? In the abandoned cabin, a kilometer from the main estate, Sophia watched Valeria nervously pace back and forth. The small structure, formerly used by temporary workers during harvest, barely offered protection against the rain that filtered through several cracks in the roof. I need to contact Riveros, insisted Valeria, futilely checking her phone with no signal. There must be a misunderstanding. I don't think it's a misunderstanding, responded Sophia, lighting a small oil lamp she had found. Those men didn't come to negotiate. You don't understand. Riveros can be ruthless in business, but he's not a criminal. He must have sent his team to warn us about something. Sophia looked at her with incredulity. Do you really believe that? After participating in a plan to fabricate false evidence against Alejandro? Valeria stopped, facing her. Things aren't as simple as they seem. My family is bankrupt, Sophia. My father faces possible charges for tax fraud. When Riveros offered a way out, it seemed the only option. There are always options, Sophia firmly responded. Options that don't involve destroying others' lives. A noise outside startled them, footsteps approaching. Sophia quickly extinguished the lamp and moved to the window, slightly parting the deteriorated curtain. "Do you see anything?" whispered Valeria, visibly terrified. "Not in this darkness," responded Sophia, squinting. A lightning bolt briefly illuminated the exterior, revealing a figure advancing toward the cabin. "There's someone outside." Both women's hearts accelerated when they heard footsteps on the rickety porch. Then, a soft knock on the door. "Sophia, it's me, Alejandro," came a whisper from outside. "I'm alone." Cautiously, Sophia opened the door a crack, confirming it was indeed Alejandro, completely soaked by the rain. "How did you find us?" she asked, letting him in. "I know every inch of this property now thanks to our walks," he responded, shaking off the water. His gaze fell on Valeria, who had taken refuge in a corner. "We have a problem. Riveros didn't send those men for a business meeting." "What do they want then?" asked Valeria with a trembling voice. "You," Alejandro directly replied. "Ricardo has been monitoring their communications. They're talking about recovering the compromised asset. And they specifically mentioned your name." "No, it can't be," she stammered. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake, Valeria. Riveros discovered your plan to extort me and decided to eliminate you from the equation." A heavy silence fell over the cabin, interrupted only by the constant drumming of rain on the roof. "What are we going to do?" Sophia finally asked. "Ricardo is distracting them while Carlos guides our security team through an alternative route. They should arrive in approximately an hour." Alejandro approached Valeria. "I need all the information you have on Riveros's plan." "Everything." The woman seemed to collapse before their eyes, all her sophisticated facade crumbling. "It began 3 months ago," she confessed in a broken voice. "My father had lost practically everything in failed investments. Riveros approached him with a proposal. Information about Montero Tech, in exchange for settling his most urgent debts." "What kind of information?" "Initially details about the Bogotá digital project. Riveros wanted to know exactly how the winning proposal had been structured. Then, when he learned of our personal history, he conceived a more ambitious plan. To bring you back into my life as a Trojan horse," concluded Alejandro. Valeria nodded miserably. "I was supposed to reconcile with you, regain your trust and obtain access to the company's internal servers. Jorge Mendez had prepared specialized malware to extract sensitive information. And when did you decide to change the plan and extort me directly?" "A week ago," she admitted. "I realized that Riveros planned to discard me once he got what he wanted. So I decided to take control of the situation. Evidently, I underestimated him." A noise outside interrupted the conversation. Alejandro quickly moved to the window, narrowing his eyes to see through the curtain of rain. "Flashlights," he murmured. 4, approaching from the east." "Your security team?" asked Sophia hopefully. "No, they would come from the west, following the path Carlos indicated to them." The 3 exchanged alarmed looks. Riveros's men had found them. "The back door," indicated Alejandro, moving quickly. "It leads to a path toward the river. If we follow it northward, we'll reach the secondary road." "With this rain, the river must be overflowing," warned Sophia. "It would be extremely dangerous." "More dangerous is staying here," he responded, carefully opening the back door. "Come on, quietly." The 3 slipped outside, immediately struck by the force of the rain. The darkness was almost total, with only occasional lightning providing momentary visibility. "Stay together," instructed Alejandro, taking Sophia's hand, who in turn held on to Valeria. "The path is just ahead." They advanced painfully through mud and soaked vegetation, guided mainly by instinct and flashes of lightning. In the distance, the roar of the swollen river grew increasingly powerful. "They went out the back!" came a shout from the cabin, followed by the beam of several flashlights sweeping the surroundings. "Faster!" urged Alejandro, accelerating despite the treacherous terrain. A particularly intense lightning bolt illuminated the scene, revealing what awaited them. The river, normally tranquil, had transformed into a furious torrent that dragged trees and debris. The rustic bridge that normally crossed it had disappeared, carried away by the flood. "We can't cross," declared Sophia, quickly assessing the situation. "It's suicide to attempt it." "And we can't go back," added Alejandro, observing the flashlights rapidly approaching. Valeria, who had remained unusually silent, stepped forward. "There's another option," she said with surprising calm. "I'll stop them while you find another route." Absolutely not, rejected Alejandro. I won't leave you behind. It's the only logical solution, she insisted. I'm the one they're looking for. If they find me, they'll leave you in peace. You don't know that, argued Sophia. They could eliminate you and then look for us anyway. It's a risk I must take, responded Valeria, with unexpected determination. I created this disaster. It's only fair that I face it. Before they could stop her, Valeria separated from them and began to deliberately walk toward the approaching lights. Valeria, no, exclaimed Alejandro, trying to follow her, but Sophia held him back with surprising strength. She's giving us time, she urgently whispered. Don't waste it. I know these mountains. There's a path following the riverbank that could lead us to the main road, but we must move now. With a divided heart, Alejandro finally nodded, allowing Sophia to guide him away from the river, deeper into the thicket. Behind them, they heard Valeria's voice calling to the men, deliberately drawing their attention away from their escape route. As they painfully advanced through the difficult terrain, Alejandro couldn't help but think of the unexpected redemption of a woman he had considered incapable of sacrifice. The truths revealed that night had irrevocably changed the course of many lives, including his own. The first light of dawn found Alejandro and Sophia on the main road, exhausted, soaked, and covered in mud. The storm had finally subsided, leaving behind a devastated but strangely beautiful landscape, with mountains emerging between tatters of mist rising from the valleys. A vehicle slowly approached, negotiating the numerous obstacles on the road: fallen branches, small landslides, deep puddles. Recognizing the estate's jeep, both felt profound relief. Carlos quickly descended upon seeing them. Thank God you're all right. We've been searching for you all night. Ricardo, Alejandro immediately asked. Safe at the estate. Our security team arrived just in time. Riveros's men are in custody except for Gutierrez, who managed to escape. And Valeria? Inquired Sophia. Carlos's expression darkened. No trace of her. We found signs of struggle near the river, and her scarf caught in some bushes at the river's edge. The news hit Alejandro like a physical weight. Despite everything that had happened, he hadn't wished this outcome for her. I need to reach Bogotá immediately, he declared, gradually recovering his composure. The board meeting is in less than 48 hours. We must stop Riveros before he can implement the rest of his plan. The heliport in Armenia is operational, informed Carlos. We can have a helicopter ready in 2 hours. Alejandro nodded, turning to Sophia. She watched him with a mixture of concern and resolution. I'm going with you, she declared before he could speak. Don't argue, we're in this together now. A tired but genuine smile illuminated Alejandro's face. I wouldn't dream of arguing with you. I never win those debates. Bogotá received Alejandro and Sophia with its characteristic highland cold and a leaden sky that presaged rain. The transition from Quindio's tropical climate proved shocking, especially for Sophia, who instinctively adjusted the borrowed jacket she wore over her still not completely dry clothes. Alejandro's penthouse in the exclusive El Chico sector seemed to belong to another life, to another person. As the private elevator transported them directly to the apartment, Alejandro observed his home through Sophia's eyes. The minimalist spaces, the Italian designer furniture, the contemporary artwork carefully selected by a professional decorator. Everything seemed simultaneously familiar and strange. Home, sweet home, he murmured with certain irony as the doors opened. Sophia advanced slowly, absorbing the environment. It's exactly as I imagined, she finally commented. Elegant, impeccable, and impersonal? He completed the phrase. She looked at him with an empathetic smile. I was going to say efficient. It perfectly reflects the Alejandro Montero that the world knew before La Esperanza. Ricardo, who had preceded them to prepare everything, appeared from one of the rooms. Sir, I have important updates. The police have begun searching for Valeria, but with the river conditions after the storm, they're not optimistic. I understand, responded Alejandro somberly. Riveros. He has suddenly cancelled all his public commitments. According to our sources, he's been meeting with his lawyers since this morning. He knows something went wrong, concluded Alejandro. The board of directors? The meeting remains scheduled for tomorrow at 10 Q. Officially, it's an ordinary session to review quarterly results. Unofficially, several members have received anonymous documentation about supposed financial irregularities under your direction. Alejandro nodded, processing the information. We need to counterattack before the meeting, discredit those documents, and expose Riveros's plan. We're already working on it, responded Ricardo. Our legal team is analyzing the recording where Valeria admits to the conspiracy. And there's more. Jorge Mendez contacted our legal department this morning. Apparently, he fears that Riveros is preparing him as a scapegoat. Is he willing to testify against him? In exchange for immunity, yes. He has evidence that Riveros personally ordered him to falsify the documentation. A spark of hope ignited in Alejandro's eyes. Arrange a meeting with him immediately, and individually contact each board member. I want to speak personally with them before tomorrow's meeting. As Ricardo withdrew to implement these instructions, Sofia approached Alejandro, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. You should rest a bit, she suggested, with genuine concern. It's been a very long night. There's no time to rest, he responded, though his body painfully protested from exhaustion. Riveros has been planning this for months. We have less than 24 hours to dismantle his strategy. Alejandro, she insisted with that quiet firmness he had learned to respect, you need to be in top form to face what's coming. A few hours of sleep won't change the outcome, but they will affect your ability to handle it. Recognizing the wisdom in her words, Alejandro finally nodded. You're right, as always. I'll rest a bit. You should do the same. The guest room is fully equipped. I will, she promised. After making a call to my father to assure him I'm fine, he must be worried. As Sofia withdrew to make her call, Alejandro contemplated the view of Bogotá from the penthouse's windows. The city stretched before him, imposing and familiar, with its skyscrapers, the green of the eastern hills and the perpetual flow of traffic. However, for the first time, he didn't feel the usual connection with the urban landscape that had defined most of his adult life. His thoughts drifted toward La Esperanza, toward the coffee fields swaying in the breeze, toward mornings waking to birdsong instead of programmed alarms, toward Sofia, working in the garden with that serene concentration he had come to deeply admire. Where was his real home now? The question resonated in his mind as he headed toward his bedroom, seeking rest he knew would be brief and uneasy. Montero Tech's headquarters occupied 10 floors of an ultra-modern tower in Bogotá's financial center. The building, with its glass and steel facade, perfectly represented the technological and progressive vision Alejandro had cultivated for his company. Entering the main lobby that afternoon, dressed in his usual tailored suit, Alejandro experienced a strange sense of dissociation. Employees greeted him with the usual mixture of respect and nervousness, but he felt like an actor interpreting a role he once knew by heart. The legal team is waiting for you in the boardroom on the 20th floor, informed Ricardo as they ascended in the executive elevator. Jorge Mendez arrived 10 minutes ago, accompanied by his lawyer. And Sofia. Miss Mendoza is touring the Social Innovation Laboratory with Carolina from the CSR department, as you suggested. Alejandro nodded, grateful. He had insisted that Sofia see this particular aspect of Montero Tech, the division dedicated to developing technological solutions for vulnerable communities. It was important to him that she see his corporate world wasn't completely disconnected from the values she cherished. The meeting with the legal team and Jorge Mendez was tense but productive. The former financial director, visibly nervous but determined, provided exhaustive details on how Riveros had pressured him to fabricate evidence against Alejandro. He threatened to reveal my own irregularities if I didn't cooperate, explained Mendez, avoiding eye contact. But I never anticipated the situation would escalate to this point. Do you have concrete evidence of Riveros's instructions? Asked Montero Tech's legal director. Mendez nodded, extracting a USB drive. I recorded several of our conversations. Riveros was quite explicit about what he wanted to achieve: to publicly discredit you, force your exit, and acquire the company at a price well below its real value. As the legal team reviewed the material, Alejandro found himself contemplating the man who, paradoxically, had been both an instrument of his potential downfall and a key to his salvation. Why did you decide to come forward now, Jorge? He finally asked. You could have remained silent. Let the plan run its course. Mendez looked up, revealing a profound weariness. Because I realized Riveros never intended to fulfill his promises. When I learned about Valeria, I understood that we were all disposable pieces in his game. The mention of Valeria provoked a momentary silence in the room. Her probable fate weighed on everyone, a grim reminder of the true stakes in this conflict. With this evidence plus Valeria's recording, we have enough to neutralize the attack at tomorrow's board meeting, concluded the legal director. I would also recommend initiating legal actions against Digilatum for fraudulent corporate practices. First, let's secure control of Montero Tech, decided Alejandro. Legal actions can wait. At the meeting's conclusion, Ricardo accompanied him toward the Social Innovation Laboratory. Carolina sent a message. Miss Mendoza has made a very positive impression on the team. Apparently, she's been suggesting applications for agricultural communities that our developers hadn't considered. Alejandro smiled, not surprised. Sophia has a unique perspective on those communities' real needs, something we, from our air-conditioned offices, sometimes lose sight of. Upon arriving at the laboratory, they found Sophia immersed in an animated discussion with several engineers. Dressed in borrowed clothes that Ricardo had hastily procured, elegant jeans and a simple blouse, she seemed perfectly at ease, enthusiastically gesturing while explaining something about early warning systems for small farmers. Your proposal has enormous applications, one of the developers was commenting. If we could integrate it with our climate monitoring system, we could provide personalized alerts according to crop type and growth stage. Exactly, nodded Sophia. And if we add a collective intelligence component, where farmers can report local conditions, we would significantly improve accuracy. Alejandro remained a moment at the threshold, observing her. Sophia had brought with her that authenticity and connection with the essential that characterized her life in Quindío, and had effortlessly transplanted it to the urban and technological environment. She didn't seem intimidated or out of place, but rather contributed a valuable perspective, precisely because of her difference. When she finally noticed his presence, Sophia's face lit up with a smile Alejandro had come to treasure. She excused herself with the engineers and approached him. "How was your meeting?" she asked in a low voice. "Better than expected. We have solid evidence against Riveros. The situation seems controllable." "I'm glad to hear it," she responded sincerely. "And thank you for showing me this division. It's fascinating to see how you're applying advanced technology to solve concrete problems for vulnerable communities. I wanted you to see that not everything in my world is cold and calculating," he admitted. "That here too we try to make a difference in people's real lives." Sophia looked at him with understanding. "I never thought you were completely cold, Alejandro. Just perhaps disconnected from certain aspects of life. But this," she gestured toward the laboratory, "demonstrates that there was always more depth to you than you showed the world." Her words moved him more than he expected. "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? There's a special place I want to show you." The restaurant Alejandro chose pleasantly surprised Sophia. Instead of the exclusive and ostentatious establishment she perhaps expected, he took her to a cozy place in La Candelaria, Bogotá's historic center. The space combined colonial elements with contemporary touches and served reinterpretations of traditional Colombian cuisine. "I discovered this place years ago when Montero Tech was just a startup struggling to survive," he explained, as they were led to a table in a quiet corner. "I would come here to think when things got difficult. There's something about the energy of these old streets that helped me find perspective." "It's beautiful," commented Sophia, admiring the simple but warm decoration. "It reminds me that Bogotá also has soul, not just cement and glass." Dinner took place in an atmosphere of shared intimacy, conversing about everything and nothing at once. By tacit agreement, they avoided discussing recent events or the imminent confrontation of the next day, allowing themselves an interlude of normality amid the chaos. "How do you really feel about all this?" Sophia finally asked, as they shared a traditional dessert of brevas with arequipe. Not the CEO facing a corporate crisis, but the man who has experienced so many changes in such a short time. Alejandro considered the question, appreciating the opportunity to express feelings he had kept contained. "Honestly, I feel at a crossroads, as if the universe had forced me to stop and reevaluate the path I was following." "And have you reached any conclusions?" "Some," he nodded, searching for the right words. "I know I can't go back to being the man I was before La Esperanza, before you. someone whose identity was completely defined by his company, by acquisitions and market valuations. "That doesn't mean you should abandon everything you've built," she observed. "Montero Tech does important things, things that improve real lives." "I know, and I don't want to abandon it, but perhaps—" He paused, organizing his thoughts. "Perhaps it's possible to integrate both worlds, to find a balance where I can contribute from my strengths, without sacrificing the authenticity and connection I found in Quindio." Sophia extended her hand across the table, intertwining her fingers with his. "True balance rarely means dividing your life into compartments. It's more about integration, about bringing the best of each experience into a coherent whole." "And you?" he asked, gently squeezing her hand. "How do you see your own path ahead?" The question briefly hung between them, laden with unexpressed implications about a possible shared future. "I love my life in Quindio," she finally responded. "The work with the community, my nursery, the daily connection with nature. But these days here have shown me that there's also beauty and purpose in environments I never considered for myself, that perhaps I too need to expand my definition of home." Their gazes met, communicating without words what both were beginning to envision, the possibility of a path that wouldn't demand choosing between two worlds, but would create a new, shared one, incorporating the best of both. As they left the restaurant into the Bogotá night, Alejandro felt a clarity gradually emerging from the chaos of recent days. Tomorrow he would face the board of directors and Riveros's machinations, but he would do so as a transformed man, with a deeper understanding of what he truly valued and a clearer vision of the life he wanted to build. Montero Tech's corporate headquarters buzzed with unusual activity that morning. Executives with tense expressions hurriedly crossed the lobby. Assistants ran with folders and tablets, and a reinforced security team discreetly monitored every entrance and exit. Alejandro, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, projected a calm that markedly contrasted with the general anxiety. At his side, Ricardo coordinated the final details for the board of directors meeting, scheduled to begin in exactly 45 minutes. "Jorge Mendez is in conference room B, prepared to testify if necessary," informed Ricardo, checking his tablet. "Our legal team has distributed individual folders to each board member with evidence that refutes the accusations." "Riveros?" asked Alejandro, slightly adjusting his tie while observing his reflection in the private elevator, transporting them to the executive floor. "He has confirmed his attendance. He'll arrive with his legal team approximately 10 minutes before the start." "Perfect. And Sophia?" "Miss Mendoza is with Carolina in the executive cafeteria. She insisted on not interfering with your preparations, but she'll be available if you need her." Alejandro nodded, grateful for Sophia's consideration. The previous night, after returning from dinner, they had conversed until late hours about the possible repercussions of the meeting and its implications for the future. Not once had she attempted to influence his professional decisions, limiting herself to offering a fresh perspective and that silent support he had come to deeply value. "There's something else," added Ricardo, as the elevator stopped at the executive floor. "A report just arrived from the Quindio police about Valeria Sandoval." Alejandro visibly tensed. "Did they find her?" "Yes." Ricardo paused, carefully selecting his words. "She was found this morning in a town 20 kilometers from La Esperanza. She's alive, though, with hypothermia and some trauma. Apparently she managed to cling to some logs during the flood and was dragged downstream until fishermen rescued her." An invisible weight seemed to lift from Alejandro's shoulders. Despite everything that had happened, the news that Valeria had survived represented an immense relief. "Has she made any statement?" "According to the report, she has confirmed everything. The conspiracy with Riveros, the plan to discredit you, even the extortion attempt. Investigators are formalizing her testimony right now." The information added a new dimension to the imminent confrontation. With Valeria alive and cooperating with the authorities, Riveros's position was considerably weakened. "Make sure our legal team receives copies of those statements as soon as possible," instructed Alejandro as they advanced toward the boardroom. They could be crucial during the meeting. Montero Tech's main boardroom occupied a privileged corner of the top floor, with windows offering a panoramic view of Bogotá. The long oval table of dark wood, surrounded by 15 ergonomic leather chairs, had witnessed countless decisions that had shaped the company's destiny. Alejandro slowly walked around the space, recalling significant moments. The first major investment, international expansion, going public. Each milestone had represented a step in building what many considered his most important legacy. But now, after his time at La Esperanza and everything experienced alongside Sofia, he saw those achievements from a different perspective. Important, yes, but not defining of his value as a human being. "Sir," Ricardo interrupted his reflections, "the board members are beginning to arrive." For the next 20 minutes, Alejandro individually received each director, maintaining brief but meaningful conversations. Most expressed concern about the accusations received, but also cautious support based on years of effective leadership. Fernando Riveros arrived exactly 8 minutes before the scheduled start, accompanied by two severe-looking lawyers. Tall, thin, with perfectly combed hair and an Italian suit that rivaled Alejandro's, he projected the image of absolute confidence that had made him a feared figure in the Colombian business world. "Alejandro," he greeted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What an unfortunate situation, don't you think?" "Unfortunate for some, certainly," responded Alejandro, holding his gaze without blinking. "Though perhaps not for whom you expected." A fraction of uncertainty crossed Riveros's face before he recovered his mask of confidence. "We'll see what the board determines when they know all the facts." "Precisely," nodded Alejandro. "All the facts." At 10 Gaung sharp, the chairman of the board of directors, Eduardo Vargas, a respected 65-year-old businessman who had supported Alejandro since Montero Tech's beginnings, formally called the meeting to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, this extraordinary session has been convened to address serious accusations regarding supposed financial irregularities under the direction of our CEO, Alejandro Montero. We also have as a guest Mr. Fernando Riveros, CEO of Digilatam, who has requested to address the board." Vargas paused, scanning those present with his gaze. "Before proceeding, I want to emphasize that this board has the fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interest of Montero Tech, its shareholders, employees, and customers. We will make decisions based exclusively on verifiable facts, not rumors or insinuations." Riveros was the first to present his case, exposing with calculated eloquence the supposed evidence of embezzlement related to the Bogotá digital project. The projected documents showed apparent irregular transfers, incriminating emails, and authorizations signed by Alejandro. As a competitor in the same sector, Riveros concluded with a solemn tone, "I consider it my ethical duty to inform this distinguished board about these irregularities. I seek no personal benefit, but to protect the integrity of the Colombian technological ecosystem." Several board members exchanged concerned looks as they examined the distributed documents. The evidence, fabricated with extreme meticulousness, appeared convincing at first glance. When his turn came, Alejandro rose with deliberate calm. Instead of immediately launching into a passionate defense, he began with a simple question. "Mr. Riveros, do you know Valeria Sandoval?" The question, seemingly disconnected from the main topic, provoked momentary bewilderment in Riveros, who quickly regained his composure. "I know her socially, like many people in our circles." "Is it relevant to this discussion?" "Extraordinarily relevant," responded Alejandro, signaling Ricardo, who distributed new folders to each board member. "What you have before you is the transcript of a recording made 2 days ago, where Miss Sandoval explains in detail how you, Mr. Riveros, recruited her to obtain privileged information about Montero Tech." Riveros's face slightly paled, but he maintained his controlled expression. "Absurd. Any recording has clearly been manipulated or taken out of context." "You also have before you," continued Alejandro imperturbably, "the official testimony of Jorge Mendez, former financial director of Montero Tech, detailing how you pressured him to fabricate precisely the evidence you just presented to us. This revelation provoked murmurs among the directors, who now examined the new documents with growing interest. And finally," Alejandro made a dramatic pause, "the Quindío police have just formalized Valeria Sandoval's statement, who miraculously survived your men's attempt to permanently silence her. Her testimony confirms every detail of the conspiracy." The room fell into absolute silence. Riveros, visibly discomposed, exchanged urgent looks with his lawyers. This is a fabrication," he finally stammered. "A desperate attempt to evade your responsibility for the committed fraud." Chairman Vargas, who had followed the exchange with analytical attention, intervened. "Are you willing, Mr. Montero, to present Mr. Mendez to testify directly before this board?" "He's waiting outside, ready to answer any questions," confirmed Alejandro. "And Miss Sandoval, currently hospitalized, but she has signed a sworn statement and is willing to testify as soon as her condition allows." Vargas nodded gravely. "Mr. Riveros, these accusations are extremely serious. How do you respond to them?" Cornered, Riveros adopted a new strategy. "All this is irrelevant in the face of documented evidence of irregular transfers, which speak for themselves." "About that," intervened Montero Tech's legal director, who had remained in the background until that moment. "Our forensic team has identified digital markers in those documents that unequivocally prove their manipulation. The technical details are on page 17 of the report you've received. The meeting extended for 3 more hours, with testimonies, forensic analyses, and technical discussions. With each new evidence presented, Riveros's position visibly deteriorated, while Alejandro's case strengthened. Finally, Vargas requested that both CEOs and their teams temporarily leave the room to allow the board to deliberate in private. While waiting in separate rooms, Alejandro received a message from Sofia. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of how you've handled this, with integrity and without letting yourself be consumed by the desire for revenge." The words touched something deep in him, reminding him that regardless of the business outcome, he had already won something infinitely more valuable during these turbulent months. When they were called back to the boardroom, the atmosphere had perceptibly changed. Vargas, with a solemn but determined expression, announced the board's unanimous resolution. After thoroughly reviewing all presented evidence, this board of directors categorically rejects the accusations against Mr. Alejandro Montero, recognizing that they form part of a deliberate attempt at corporate manipulation by Digilatum. We reaffirm our full confidence in his leadership and in Montero Tech's integrity. Turning to Riveros, Vargas continued with a severe tone. "As for you, Mr. Riveros, the board has instructed our legal team to file formal complaints for corporate fraud, market manipulation, and obstruction of justice. We suggest you immediately leave these premises." Riveros, completely stripped of his usual arrogance, left the room flanked by his lawyers, now visibly concerned about the legal implications they faced. Once alone with the board, Alejandro sincerely thanked them for their trust and support. However, to everyone's surprise, he didn't conclude his intervention there. "This experience has been deeply transformative," he continued with a reflective voice. "It has forced me to reevaluate priorities and reconnect with fundamental aspects I had neglected in my exclusive dedication to Montero Tech." The directors listened with increasing interest, perceiving that a significant announcement was approaching. "Therefore, I would like to propose a restructuring of the executive leadership. I would maintain my position as chairman of the board and director of innovation, but we would appoint a new CEO for daily operations, allowing me to divide my time between Bogotá and our new sustainable technology division, which I will establish in Quindío." The proposal generated a murmur of surprise among the directors. Vargas, recovering first, inquired, "Do you have any candidate in mind for the operational CEO position?" "Ricardo Salazar," responded Alejandro without hesitation. "He has repeatedly demonstrated his strategic capacity, integrity, and commitment to Montero Tech's fundamental values. No one knows the company better or is better prepared to lead its next growth phase." Ricardo, who had remained discreetly in the background throughout the meeting, couldn't completely hide his astonishment at the proposal. After brief deliberation, the board tentatively approved the restructuring, pending a detailed formal proposal that Alejandro would present in the coming weeks. At the meeting's conclusion, as the directors gradually withdrew, exchanging impressions about the dramatic events, Alejandro approached the window, contemplating Bogotá's panorama. The city continued its frantic rhythm, oblivious to the small corporate drama that had just been resolved in the heights of one of its skyscrapers. Ricardo approached, still visibly impacted by the unexpected turn of events. "Sir, Alejandro, I don't know what to say. This proposal, it's the right thing, Ricardo," responded Alejandro, turning toward his faithful assistant and now potential successor. For the company and for me. You've been prepared for this for years, though perhaps neither of us knew it. Are you sure about the division in Quindio? Isn't it a hasty decision influenced by recent circumstances? A tranquil smile appeared on Alejandro's face. On the contrary, it's probably the most considered decision I've made in years. Technology can transform lives not only in large cities, but especially in rural communities. And to develop truly meaningful solutions, we need to be immersed in those realities, not contemplating them from the distance of corporate offices. The door to the room softly opened, revealing Sophia, who had been informed of the outcome. Her presence, simple but radiant amid the corporate environment, seemed to illuminate the space in a way that the sophisticated lighting systems couldn't achieve. "Congratulations," she said, approaching Alejandro, "for doing the right thing, even when the path was difficult." "I had an excellent teacher in that," he responded, gently taking her hand. "Someone who taught me that true strength isn't in never falling, but in rising, transformed by the experience." As the three left the boardroom, Alejandro felt an inner clarity and peace that had eluded the successful but lonely CEO he was before that fateful cancelled wedding. Destiny, in its mysterious wisdom, had offered him not the ending he expected, but the beginning he truly needed. 6 months later, La Esperanza looked unrecognizable compared to the neglected property that had received a disheartened and embittered Alejandro Montero. The colonial house shone with its newly restored facade. The gardens designed by Sophia had reached a controlled exuberance that perfectly integrated aesthetics with functionality, and a new structure of contemporary design, yet harmonious with the traditional surroundings, housed Montero Tech's Rural Technological Innovation Center. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the property buzzed with unusual activities. Workers put the finishing touches on the large central courtyard, where tables decorated with local flowers were strategically arranged under garlands of lights. The aroma of traditional dishes being prepared in the kitchens permeated the air, mixing with the natural fragrance of the surrounding coffee fields. In his room, Alejandro adjusted the collar of his white guayabera in front of the mirror, a garment he would have considered unthinkable in his previous corporate life, but that now felt perfectly natural. Ricardo, who had traveled from Bogotá for the occasion, observed him with an amused expression. "I never imagined seeing you so relaxed on such an important night," he commented, simultaneously checking some emails on his tablet. The old Alejandro would be compulsively verifying every detail. "The old Alejandro was an obsessive controller," he responded with a calm smile. "The new one has learned to trust the right people and enjoy the process, not just the results." Speaking of results, Ricardo placed the tablet on the bed. The first quarter figures under the new structure are exceptional. The Rural Technology Division you established here has generated 3 potentially revolutionary patents, and the climate monitoring application for small farmers already has more than 50,000 active users in 5 countries. See? Sometimes stepping away from the traditional center of power opens completely new perspectives, responded Alejandro, recalling how that decision to establish a technological division in the heart of the coffee region had initially generated skepticism among some investors. "By the way," continued Ricardo, "Valeria Sandoval sent her confirmation this morning. She will attend with her father." The news slightly surprised Alejandro. Although Valeria had extensively collaborated with the authorities, providing crucial evidence that had led Fernando Riveros to face multiple criminal charges, they hadn't maintained personal contact after the events at La Esperanza. "Are you sure it's appropriate to invite her considering everything that happened?" asked Ricardo, expressing the doubt many shared. Alejandro reflected before responding. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing to build something better on the ruins of the past. Valeria made serious mistakes, but she also demonstrated courage in the end and has paid a high price for her actions." The conversation was interrupted by Carlos, who appeared at the door with a slightly anxious expression. "Don Alejandro, the first guests are arriving, and Miss Sophia is asking if she can see you before the celebration." "Of course," he immediately responded, feeling that familiar flutter in his stomach that he experienced each time she requested him, even after months of relationship. "Tell her I'll wait for her at the viewpoint in the Eastern Garden." As Ricardo and Carlos withdrew to attend to the guests who were beginning to arrive, Alejandro headed toward the small viewpoint they had built at one of the property's highest points. The place offered a spectacular view of the surrounding valleys, with mountains silhouetted against the sky that was beginning to be tinged with orange and purple hues. Upon arriving, he found Sophia contemplating the landscape, dressed in a simple but elegant ivory-colored dress that perfectly complemented her brown skin. She wore her hair loose, adorned only with a small white flower picked from the garden. He had never seen her more beautiful. "I thought you'd be finalizing details for the celebration," he commented, approaching quietly. She turned, smiling upon seeing him. "I wanted a few minutes of peace before the bustle begins, and I needed to see you alone." Alejandro noticed certain tension in her voice. "Is something wrong?" Sophia breathed deeply, as if gathering courage. "Do you remember the first time we really talked? It was right here when I explained my vision for restoring the gardens." "I remember it perfectly," he nodded. "You impressed me with your determination and clarity. At that moment, you were to me just the millionaire from Bogotá, someone completely alien to my world," she continued with a nostalgic smile. "I never imagined that 6 months later we would be here, celebrating not only the official inauguration of the center, but also—" She stopped, searching for the right words. "Us?" he gently completed. "Precisely. Sometimes I wonder if we've really managed to build a solid bridge between our worlds, or if we're just in a beautiful interlude that will eventually yield to the fundamental differences in our lives." Alejandro then understood the root of her concern. Despite the shared months, the deep relationship they had developed, Sophia still harbored that initial fear that he would eventually tire of rural life and definitively return to his urban and corporate existence. "Come with me," he said, gently taking her hand. "There's something I want to show you before all the guests arrive." He guided her toward a section of the garden that had mysteriously remained closed during the past weeks. A small stone path led to a separate area, divided by a pergola covered with flowering vines. "I've been working on this in secret," he explained as they advanced, with help from Carlos and some local artisans. Upon crossing the pergola, Sophia stopped short, bringing a hand to her mouth in a gesture of surprise. Before them extended an intimate garden, designed as a perfect fusion of the two worlds they represented. Native plants from Quindio, harmoniously intertwined with more sophisticated ornamental species. A small pond with sustainable purification technology reflected the sunset sky. Artisanal benches of local wood alternated with elements of contemporary design. In the center of the space, a small but beautiful structure, half greenhouse, half studio, softly glowed with warm lights. "It's perfect," murmured Sophia, slowly advancing to absorb every detail. "Did you design this?" "With a lot of help," he admitted. "I wanted to create a space that symbolized what we've been building these months, not two separate lives that occasionally meet, but a new shared reality that takes the best from both worlds." Upon reaching the small building, Alejandro opened the door. The interior was divided into two areas that naturally flowed into each other: a technological workspace with the latest equipment, and an area dedicated to botanical research, with work tables for plant propagation and shelving for specimens. "Sophia Mendoza," he said, turning to look directly into her eyes, "would you accept sharing this space with me? Not just as a garden, but as a symbol of a life built together, where your dreams and mine can grow intertwined, like these plants you've taught to coexist." Her eyes shone with contained tears as she surveyed the space with her gaze, understanding the depth of the gesture. It wasn't simply a material gift, it was a tangible declaration of commitment, a promise of shared future. "Alejandro Montero," she finally responded with a firm voice despite the emotion, "I accept this space and all it represents. I accept building this life between two worlds, which little by little is becoming our own world." When their lips met, sealing that promise with a kiss that tasted of future and infinite possibilities, the sunset projected their united shadows over the garden they had created together. The inauguration celebration of the Rural Technological Innovation Center turned out to be much more than a corporate event. La Esperanza Estate vibrated with a fascinating mixture of worlds. Technology executives from Bogotá animatedly conversed with local coffee farmers. Computer engineers exchanged ideas with traditional artisans. Internationally renowned chefs served sophisticated reinterpretations of regional dishes. Ricardo, who had assumed the operational CEO role of Montero Tech with notable success, moved naturally among the diverse groups, connecting people and possibilities with that diplomatic ability that characterized him. "I never thought I'd see Colombia's technological elite dancing joropo with the estate workers," he commented with amusement to Alejandro, discreetly pointing toward a group that had formed around the local musicians. "The best advances occur when different worlds meet," responded Alejandro, pleased to observe how some of his former corporate competitors listened with genuine interest to a farmer explaining traditional sustainable cultivation techniques. The potentially most awkward moment of the night occurred when Valeria Sandoval arrived, accompanied by her father. Dressed with sober elegance and an expression of nervous determination, she approached directly to where Alejandro was conversing with Sofia and several guests. "Alejandro, Sofia," she greeted with a formality that barely concealed her discomfort. "Thank you for the invitation. It's truly impressive what you've accomplished here." The momentary tension was dissipated by Sofia's warm response, who extended her hand toward her with genuine kindness. "We're very glad you could come, Valeria. Welcome to La Esperanza." The brief exchange of glances between both women communicated more than the formal words, a shared recognition of the difficult path traveled, and the mutual decision to build something positive on the rubble of the past. Later, when Alejandro found himself briefly alone with Valeria by the beverage table, she spoke with unusual sincerity. "I never had the chance to properly tell you," she began with a slightly trembling voice, "but I'm truly sorry for all the harm I caused, not just for the plan with Riveros, but for the way I ended our engagement." "Everything happens for a reason, Valeria," he responded with genuine serenity. "If you hadn't cancelled that wedding, I would never have discovered what I really needed in my life." She nodded, observing Sofia, who was animatedly conversing with a group of local artisan women. "You're perfect together, you know, complementary in a way that you and I never were. And you? How is your new life going?" A small smile appeared on Valeria's lips. "Difficult, but surprisingly satisfying. The Rural Microfinancing Foundation we established as part of my agreement with the prosecution has shown me a purpose I never thought possible. It turns out that helping women entrepreneurs in vulnerable communities is much more rewarding than organizing charity galas for high society." "I'm glad to hear it," Alejandro sincerely responded. "Sometimes the most difficult paths lead us exactly where we needed to be, though we didn't know it." The conversation was interrupted by Carlos, who discreetly approached to inform Alejandro that everything was ready for the official announcement. With a parting nod to Valeria, he headed toward the small platform installed in the center of the courtyard. The murmur of conversations gradually died down as Alejandro took position, with Ricardo and Sofia flanking him on both sides. "Today we officially celebrate the inauguration of Montero Tech's Rural Technological Innovation Center, a project that seeks to demonstrate that technological progress and traditional wisdom are not opposing forces, but complementary ones." As he detailed the vision and mission of the center, Alejandro perceived in the attentive faces of the attendees something that transcended the usual corporate interest, a genuine curiosity about this new way of integrating seemingly distant worlds. "Distinguished guests, friends, collaborators, and neighbors of this community that has so generously welcomed me," he began, scanning the diverse audience with his gaze. "This center is not simply a rural extension of our headquarters in Bogotá," he continued, "but a living laboratory where technology is developed in constant dialogue with the real needs of rural communities, respecting their traditions and ancestral knowledge." He paused, seeking Sofia's gaze, who smiled at him with that silent support he had come to value above all else. "But this celebration also has a profound personal significance. Just over 8 months ago, I arrived at La Esperanza as a defeated man seeking to escape a public humiliation. An ironic smile crossed his face. What I found here, thanks to many of you, was much more valuable. A reconnection with the essential, an authentic community, and a completely new perspective on what success really means." His eyes then fell on Sofia, and his expression transformed with a tenderness that surprised those who had only known the relentless CEO of previous years. "And I found something I never knew I was looking for until it appeared in my life." A companion who daily challenges me to be better, who anchors me in the authentic when I stray, and who has taught me that true power isn't in controlling, but in cultivating. Sophia, visibly moved, maintained her composure with evident effort. Alejandro continued, now addressing the entire audience. Therefore, in addition to officially inaugurating the center, I would like to make a personal announcement. He extended his hand toward Sophia, inviting her to join him at the center of the platform. Sophia Mendoza and I want to share with you that, as of today, we are not only partners in this professional project, but we have decided to formalize our personal union. A murmur of surprise and approval ran through the audience, quickly followed by enthusiastic applause, especially from the townspeople who had observed with growing interest the romance that had blossomed between the city businessman and their beloved fellow citizen. It won't be a traditional wedding, clarified Sophia, taking the floor with that naturalness that characterized her, but a commitment ceremony that honors our different traditions and celebrates this union of worlds that we have been building together. Ricardo was the first to raise his glass. To Alejandro and Sophia, who have shown us that the best bridges are not those that connect places, but those that connect hearts. As glasses were raised and good wishes flowed, Alejandro contemplated the courtyard full of people from such diverse worlds, united in celebration. In that moment, he understood that life, like the coffee fields that now formed part of his identity, required time, patience, and constant care to truly flourish, and that sometimes the most painful of endings could simply be the necessary prelude to the most beautiful of beginnings. 2 years later, dawn arrived slowly at La Esperanza, tinting the sky with pinkish hues that reflected in dewdrops on the leaves of the coffee plants. It was harvest season, and the estate vibrated with that particular energy that accompanied the collection of the red fruits that had patiently matured over months. On the main terrace of the house, Alejandro contemplated the movement of workers among the coffee fields, a cup of freshly prepared coffee in his hands. At 37, his face showed some lines of expression that weren't present when he first arrived at this property, but his eyes reflected a serenity that the successful but lonely CEO of yesteryear had never known. "You woke up early," commented Sophia, joining him with her own cup. Her figure, slightly more rounded by the 5-month pregnancy, moved with that natural grace that had always captivated him. "I didn't want to miss the beginning of the harvest," he responded, surrounding her with one arm as they both observed the landscape, especially this one. It was indeed a special harvest. The coffee plants grown following traditional methods, but monitored with technology developed at the center, had produced a unique variety, the result of 2 years of careful experimentation. The first tastings promised an exceptional coffee, which had already generated interest among specialized buyers from various countries. "Nervous about this afternoon's presentation?" she asked, resting her head against his shoulder. "Strangely, no," he responded with sincerity. "And the fact that it was developed here, in direct collaboration with those who will use it, gives it a legitimacy that no product created exclusively in our Bogotá laboratories could have." The Rural Technological Innovation Center had become an internationally studied model. Engineers and developers worked in constant communication with local farmers, artisans, and indigenous communities, creating technological solutions that respected and enhanced traditional knowledge instead of replacing it. Ricardo is right. This climate monitoring system could transform how small farmers face climate change. "You know what's most beautiful?" reflected Sophia, observing a group of young people from town participating in the center's technological training program. That these kids no longer have to choose between abandoning their land to seek opportunities in the city or staying and renouncing professional development. They're creating a new path that integrates both worlds. Alejandro nodded, recognizing in that observation the core of what they had been building, not only professionally, but in their personal life. A model that demonstrated that apparent dichotomies, tradition versus innovation, rural versus urban, personal growth versus community connection, could transform into enriching complements when approached with mutual respect and integrative vision. "I received a message from Valeria this morning," he commented, as they both headed to the dining room where breakfast awaited. "Her microfinancing program for women artisans has been selected as a case study by the Inter-American Development Bank." Wonderful, Sophia responded with genuine joy. It's amazing how she has channeled her intelligence and determination towards something so positive. The mention of Valeria no longer provoked tension between them. Time had transformed that complicated story into just another chapter of their shared journey, a reminder of how the most painful circumstances could, eventually, lead to positive transformations when faced with honesty and willingness to change. The afternoon found La Esperanza transformed into the stage for an event that combined elements of a technological fair, artisanal market, and community celebration. Representatives from rural communities of various Latin American countries mingled with international investors interested in sustainable technologies, creating an environment of vibrant and productive exchange. At the center of the event, Alejandro, along with a team formed by developers from the center and local farmers who had participated in the testing phase, presented the Integrated Community Climate Monitoring System, a network of low-cost devices that allowed small producers to anticipate adverse weather conditions and adapt their agricultural practices in real time. "What's revolutionary about this system isn't just its technology," explained one of the participating farmers, with the pride of someone who has significantly contributed to an important innovation, but how it integrates our traditional knowledge about natural bioindicators with satellite data and local sensors. From a discreet corner, Sophia observed the presentation with a mixture of pride and reflection. The contrast between this Alejandro, relaxed in jeans and casual shirt, collaborating on equal footing with farmers, attentively listening to their observations, and that tense and controlling executive she had met 2 years ago, was profound. Ricardo, who had traveled from Bogota especially for the event, approached her. "It's amazing what you've built here," he commented, observing the vibrant environment. When he first proposed establishing a rural division, half the board thought it was a temporary eccentricity. Sophia smiled, recalling those first months of uncertainty. "There were moments when I myself doubted if we could really create this bridge between such different worlds, if the gap wouldn't be too wide. And now? Now I understand that it wasn't about building a bridge between separate worlds," she responded, gently caressing her belly, where the new life that perfectly symbolized that integration grew. "But about recognizing that, at heart, they are complementary aspects of the same reality." The afternoon progressed among technological demonstrations, cultural exchanges, and community celebrations. When the sun began to descend, tinting the coffee fields golden, Alejandro finally joined Sophia, who was animatedly conversing with a group of local artisans about e-commerce possibilities for their products. "I'll kidnap you for a moment," he murmured in her ear, discreetly guiding her toward their shared garden, that space they had created as a symbol of their union, and that now flourished exuberantly, reflecting 2 years of constant care. "Escaping from your responsibilities as host," she joked, willingly following him to this refuge that both considered the true heart of La Esperanza. "Let's say I'm prioritizing," he responded with a smile, as they sat on a bench under a flowering tree. "I wanted a moment alone with you on this significant day." "Because of the system presentation?" "Because of everything," he explained, taking her hands in his. "Today marks exactly 2 years since that commitment ceremony we celebrated, along with the center's inauguration. 2 years since we officially stopped being 2 people navigating between 2 worlds to become architects of our own shared world." Sophia smiled, moved by his precise memory of the date. "They've been the most intense, challenging, and beautiful 2 years of my life," she confessed, intertwining her fingers with his. "You know what I was thinking this morning? Observing the beginning of the harvest," continued Alejandro with that reflectiveness he had developed during his time at La Esperanza, "that our lives are like these coffee plants. They need deep and stable roots, but also spaces to grow and extend. They require constant care, patience during periods of silent growth, and the wisdom to recognize when it's time to harvest. And the willingness to begin the cycle anew, season after season," she added, perfectly understanding the analogy. "Accepting that each harvest will be slightly different from the previous one, influenced by the unique conditions of that period." The sound of laughter and music reached them, muffled from the main celebration, creating a perfect backdrop for this intimate moment. In the distance, the mountains were tinged purple with the last rays of the sun, while the first stars began to appear in the sky. "I wouldn't change anything," declared Alejandro with sudden intensity, looking directly into her eyes. "Not even the pain of that abandonment that brought me here. Every step, every stumble, every difficult decision led us exactly to where we needed to be." Sophia placed a hand on his face in a caress full of tenderness. "The universe has mysterious ways of leading us toward our true destiny," she murmured. "Sometimes through paths we would never have voluntarily chosen." When they kissed under the flowering tree, in that garden they had created together, both felt that deep certainty that only comes when one finally finds their place in the world. Not a geographical place, but that emotional space where the heart recognizes its true home. The celebration would continue for hours. The harvest would extend for weeks, and the challenges of integrating seemingly opposite worlds would continue to present themselves regularly. But in that perfect moment, suspended between the day that was ending and the night that was beginning, Alejandro and Sophia harvested the most valuable fruit of their improbable encounter. The understanding that true love doesn't erase differences, but creates a space where these can coexist and enrich each other, like the diverse plants in their garden, each contributing its unique beauty to the harmonious whole. And as they returned, hand in hand, toward the celebration where friends, collaborators, and community awaited them, both carried with them the serene certainty that life, like the best coffees, reveals its most complex and satisfying flavors only when given the necessary time to fully develop, and that sometimes the most unexpected path turns out to be exactly the one we needed to travel.